Ah, this one's joyously beautiful. And yeah, having taken years of abuse from Musk Hyperloop fans and Musk SpaceX fans, I'll admit it, I'm going to take a little vicarious pleasure in savouring the tears of unfathomable sorrow of SpaceX fans. In that now, even Musk acknowledges that Starship is a failure.
Search your feelings, you know it to be true.
No! No!
No! It's not true! That's impossible!
Oh, the tears of unfathomable sadness. Yummy, yummy, you get.
Stage 1. Make promises that only idiots could believe.
Let's say, Enceladus or Europa or any of those few options, and then doing another one on Titan, Saturn's moon, and then perhaps another one further out on Pluto or elsewhere in the solar system. This system really gives you freedom to go anywhere you want in the greater solar system.
I mean, choose your level of comically delusional bullshit. Like the flight time to Enceladus, Saturn, is going to be about 5 years, and the crew's bones will have turned to jelly. They'll be frozen out of power, food, and oxygen. And a couple of years later, in 2019, Musk was there to repeat the exact same bullshit again and say that they were going to be in orbit within a year, and the mainstream media just lapped it all up.
SpaceX founder and CEO Elon Musk unveiling the company's next generation rocket called the Starship. It's being built to carry people deep into space. Musk outlined a rapid schedule for the program's development. He says he thinks we could potentially see people flying next year if SpaceX gets into orbit in about 6 months.
Of course, we can go to other places in the solar system, like Saturn.
And a decade or so on from the original promises on its 6th flight, the system achieved what everyone said was impossible. It shipped a banana from Texas to the Indian Ocean, where the vehicle blew up. Just a little bit short of Enceladus.
Further out on Pluto or elsewhere in the solar system.
Yeah, Starship, rather than exploring the solar system, can ship almost any fruit item to any ocean, and all it cost was about $3 billion of taxpayers' money.
Marginal cost of launch, maybe $100 million. So every explosion, it's like,
how pissed are you?
Boom, that was $100 million.
Fuck. That's gambling.
No, that's gambling with taxpayers' money.
That's gambling.
Yeah, put the chips on.
For any given expenditure, we have to say, well, what does this do for the citizens of America? Like, how is this good for the people of America? It's their money.
Yeah, put the chips on.
Like, for some weird reason, a lot of people in the sort of, state or whatever, the politicians, they seem to forget that the money being spent is your money. And if it's not being spent in a way that is beneficial to the American people, it's a misuse of the funds.
Yeah, put the chips on.
And it doesn't work when, years later, you're starting to get version numbers. These are the stages of a Musk failure. Starship is a failure. That's not my assessment. That's Elon Musk's. And he's right. You don't have to make Starship a 2 and 3 if version 1 works. Version 1 that was going to land on Mars in 2022 and land humans on Mars in 2024.
So then in 2024, we want to try to fly 4 ships, 2 of which would be crewed, and 2 of which, two cargo and two crew.
Meanwhile, in 2024, it's not actually Starship landing on Mars. There's going to be a new version of Starship which might be able to make it to orbit.
And inevitably, the rocket grows in height. So Starship 2, we're aiming for, currently Flight 3 would be around 40 or 50 tons to orbit. So the current design, Starship 2 will be over 100 tons, and then Starship 3 will be over 200 tons.
What? I seem to recall Starship 0 being able to take 300 tons to orbit.
In expandable mode, the vehicle approach that we're proposing would do about 550 tons and about 300 tons in reusable mode. That compares to Saturn's V max capability of 135 tons.
So that the Starship can get to orbit with, let's say, 150 tons of payload for the Moon or Mars.
It's a 100-ton capability to orbit. Like currently, Flight 3 would be around 40 or 50 tons to orbit.
Yeah, sure, it would have been, but it was actually just completely empty. So if you're wondering what Musk's claims of Starship payload to orbit versus time look like, it looks like this. Except it doesn't really matter whether the scale there is tons or grams, because a banana is only about 50 grams, and Musk didn't take it to orbit. You know, there's just a slight difference between Starship version 0, which was
about 300 tons in reusable mode,
and what was delivered. You see, about the same time that Musk was unveiling Starship, he was also saying that full self-driving was safer than a human right now.
relatively easy, and like a Model S and Model X at this point can drive autonomously with greater safety than a person right now.
And a year or so later, that it would drive across America with no human interventions whatsoever.
Essentially, November or December of this year, we should be able to go from, all the way from a parking lot in California to a parking lot in New York, no controls touched at any point during the entire journey.
Amazing.
And a few years later, Musk said without hyperbole that for certain full self-driving would be ready that year.
So, I wrote software for like 15 years, 20 years. I know what we need to solve to make full self-driving feature complete. I'm certain that we will get this done this year. Feature complete for full self-driving this year with certainty. This is something that we control, and I manage autopilot engineering directly every week in detail. So I'm certain of this.
And in 2021, he finally released full self-driving version 10, which he said would blow your mind.
This morning, Tesla CEO Elon Musk, just hours ago, made a couple of very important tweets and replies to other tweets. And in one of them, Tesla's Elon Musk said, full self-driving 10, FSD 10, will blow minds.
And hey, some 4 years later. No, really, this time it's mind-blowing. No, it's evolved all the way from safer than a human now in 2016 to the latest version of a supervised full self-driving. It will blow your mind, whatever the latest version is. It's evolved from full self-driving to full self-driving version 12.6.1.2 supervised, where the reality is the only thing that's amazing about it is it'll try and kill you about every 10 minutes. So yeah, if you're pinning your hopes on Starship 2 and 3, warning.
Not true. That's impossible.
Yeah, that sound you can hear, that's the sound of 1,000 Musk fans' heart breaking.
Search your feelings. You know it to be true.
Yeah, I've been taking abuse from these SpaceX Muppets for years. I am so past having pity for them. Now, Musk has a reason for his failure, in that he took the $3 billion or so of taxpayer money to deliver the human landing system, which was going to land on the moon in 2024, but instead delivered fruit to a distant ocean via not orbit. That was because of government regulation.
Starship is capable of building a city on Mars and a city on the moon. That's what it's designed to do. But we're being massively slowed down by regulatory molasses.
So why is this bullshit? Well, rockets run on tiny margins. Typically, a rocket is some 90% by weight fuel, some 10% is the tube in the engines, and only about 1% or so of the launch mass of the rocket makes it to orbit. I mean, even if you take Starship, it's incredibly rosy numbers of 200 tons to orbit. It's only like 4 mass percent goes to orbit. But if you take something more demonstrable, like say for instance 50 tons, now you're down to about 1% mass to orbit. And if it's more like a banana, then it's going to be significantly less than that. And if it doesn't get to orbit, then it's going to be 0. So you know what will be the absolute kiss of death for a design where your rocket engine's meant to produce, say, 3.5 tons of thrust for Raptor version 0, and its actual thrust is like 20-30% down on that.
This is going to be the highest chamber pressure engine of any kind ever built, and probably the highest thrust to weight. It's a full flow staged combustion engine.
And boom, there you go. Raptor version 0, 3.5 tons of thrust.
And part of the reason for making the engine sort of small, like Raptor, although it has 3 times the thrust of a Merlin, is actually only about the same size as a Merlin engine because it has 3 times the operating pressure.
And a couple of years later, they've made so much progress that they've, give or take, halved the thrust of the engine.
For the vacuum Raptor engines, aspirationally, the
Note for full context, Musk has a 100% track record of failure on delivering anything he's ever labeled as aspirational.
And aspirationally, the target is a 380-second ISP for the vacuum engine. This is a very, in sort of space geek terms, this is like really a great number.
Not if for your rocket to work, you need almost twice that thrust. So a few years later, they come up with Raptor 2, which at this point is what they've used on their first 6 flights with boosters. And this lack of thrust is probably why it can't take anything to orbit.
So in terms of performance, we've made dramatic progress on every level for Starship. It's remarkable that you can see the Raptor engines.
Yeah, just let me add Raptor 0 and the years these engines came out in for you.
And how it has evolved from, optimistically 185 tons to 280. And I think ultimately the booster engines will aim to get the booster engines.
For full context, whenever Musk uses words like ultimately and we will probably, he has a 100% track record of failure. For instance, these are the exact same things he described for the Raptor 0 in 2017, which is almost a decade ago now.
180, and I think ultimately the booster engines will aim to get the booster engines over 330 tons of thrust, which would mean 10,000 tons of total thrust at liftoff.
So you remember what I said earlier about orbital rockets are all marginal. This is a field where a few percent down on the thrust that you want and you literally get nothing to orbit. Now, some might take a look at these numbers and say, well, they're getting better, aren't they? Well, no, not really. The Raptor 2 that you see there, Musk said was basically a solved problem in 2022.
So the only remaining issue that we're aware of is melting the chamber. So that thing really wants to melt, exact sort of balance between head-end foam cooling and throat foam cooling to not melt the chamber. I think we're pretty close. Like we have a couple engines in the stand that have I think 700 or 800 seconds of operation and several start cycles.
And it's not just a matter of you just keep jacking up the thrust on these things, because eventually they do just melt the engine and you blow up the rocket. Which is probably why in 2023 the Government Accountability Office, which monitors how efficiently government spends its money, before Elon Musk decided it would be much more effective if you had 2 departments doing effectively the same thing. While in an act showing supreme lack of self-awareness, tweeting out that there are too many duplicative agencies. Anyway, in 2023 they said that the development of the SpaceX Raptor engine is one of the program's top risks. So here we are, having blown some $3 billion of taxpayers' money to make an engine that was incapable of making the rocket work. Having thrown some 250 of these engines into the Gulf of Mexico and Indian Ocean, only to come to the stunning conclusion that you'd spent all that money making obsolete engines. The timeline, for those who are a little fuzzy on it, Musk put in his bid to create the human landing system for NASA for some $3 billion in 2019. And they were meant to be getting it to the moon by 2024. Whereas in reality, by 2024, all they'd done was thoroughly test an engine that was utterly inadequate for purpose. 2024, and they've still not hit the first marker on this Gantt chart. And not by a little way either. And Musk's conclusion is, no, we weren't making obsolete engines and throwing them into the ocean. We failed because of government regulation.
Starship is capable of building a city on Mars and a city on the moon. That's what it's designed to do. But we're being massively slowed down by regulatory molasses.
Let me get this straight. By your timeline, you should have already cracked rapid orbital reuse, cracked storing cryogenics in space, cracked orbital refueling, and having crafts capable of keeping humans alive for extended periods of time in space, and cracked multiple turbopump refirings in deep space, and landed on the moon. Whereas you've achieved optimistically 1% of this, super optimistically 5%. Having spent essentially the entire budget. And thus far have only achieved what in 2017 Musk said was the easiest, most simple goal.
And then development of the booster. We actually think the booster part is relatively straightforward because it amounts to a scaling up of the Falcon 9 booster. So we don't see a lot of sort of showstoppers there.
I mean, sure, they've not got the booster to reuse, let alone rapid reuse, let alone cost-effective rapid reuse, but they did get a single booster back, having spent essentially the entire budget. And your excuse for this is government regulation? Are you serious? But there's no cult so eager to see this as amazing progress as SpaceX fanboys. Musk fans are the titans in the land of self-delusion. They'll look at a chart like this and say, wow, that's amazing progress, truly revolutionary, we're almost on Mars. And they'll churn out hundreds, thousands of videos to millions of fans saying how amazing this progress is. And then will call me obsessed by putting out a dozen or so videos. You know, pointing out the bloody obvious that this is terrible progress, and if this is not going to get you to the moon in the next decade. The more so, seeing as they've already spent all of the money. Thunderfoot's just so salty. He's jealous of the amazing progress SpaceX is making, and he looks funny. He's so obsessed he can't see the amazing progress that Musk has made. Got breaking news for you. I don't trade on my looks or feelings. I trade on being the guy who can see the cold, hard reality of the big picture that thousands of delusional Muppets like you cannot. Because the facts are undeniable at this point for essentially the entire contract value and the entire contract time. Rather than landing on the moon, they delivered a single banana to the Indian Ocean. That was probably singed to a crisp by re-entry.
The thickness of the tile is actually, for a reusable system, is dependent on what back shell temperature, like how hot does the back of the tile that interfaces with the airframe get? And because the steel can take a much higher temperature, steel has a melting temperature around sort of 1500 degrees centigrade.
Yeah, in all likelihood, the reason why they never show you what it looks like inside the craft during re-entry is because it's probably glowing red hot and then exploded. But it's an interesting question. You know, how do you take $3 billion of government money and deliver essentially nothing and not go to jail? In fact, there might be some out there who are wondering how a firm fixed price contract of $3 billion suddenly expanded up to the best part of 5, especially seeing as they're apparently making such poor progress. Well, seeing as it was absolutely clear that Starship was never going to make it to the moon, NASA decided to award them a extension contract to build an upgraded Starship to go to the moon after the first one. So basically, SpaceX is now blowing the money to make the upgraded Starship for the second lunar mission. Now, for blowing $4 billion of government money and essentially having nothing to show for it, yeah, a reckoning might be on its way. So how do you avoid jail? I think maybe the answer at that is you take some 10% of that money and you use it to basically buy favor with the president, who then, if you're lucky, will actually appoint a SpaceX fanboy as the head of NASA, which is not far off how SpaceX got this $3 billion off the government in the first place, in that Kathy Leaders made a single decision that she was going to award the contract to SpaceX and then quit her job and shortly afterwards took her job working for SpaceX. But Trump has just announced that they're going to give expedited treatment, super fast permits and that sort of thing to anyone who invests more than $1 billion in America. Which is very lucky, seeing as SpaceX has invested well over $1 billion in America. I mean, sure, it was taxpayers' money, but, who's counting? Does any of this move the progress bar? Well, no. But it maybe keeps Musk out of jail. But just so we're clear, Musk was always keen on using the dog ate my homework excuse of government regulations, to explain lack of progress.
Ground systems, software, like if you were to get some kind of approval from the FAA in March, would you be looking at, how quickly could the hardware be ready to go?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're close to having the hardware ready to go. So right now, I think we're tracking to have the regulatory approval and hardware readiness around the same time. Around the same, hopefully, basically a couple months for both.
Yeah, that was in February 2022. They got the launch license in August of 2022. And of course, they were ready to go immediately because it was all the regulatory holdups. Oh no, it took about another 6 months before they were ready to launch their rocket, which then blew up after about 4 minutes. But 2022 had some good gems in it, like this.
But I'm highly confident it would be less than $10 million all in over, if you say like fast forward like 2 or 3 years from now. I think it's highly likely to be everything included less than $10 million a flight for 100-ton to orbit capability.
And by the power of time travel, we scrolled forward 2 years.
Marginal cost of launch, maybe $100 million. So every explosion, it's like,
how pissed are you?
Boom, that was $100 million.
Fuck. That's gambling.
Yeah, put the chips on.
And 100 tons to a useful orbit, not to a low orbit. To a low orbit, it would be 150 tons.
And he didn't make 150 tons to low Earth orbit. In fact, he made 0 tons to low Earth orbit. But he did take a 50-gram banana to the Indian Ocean.
So this is ridiculously good compared to everything else. And it should be, because there might be a few bumps along the road, but it'll work. I feel, at this point, highly confident that we'll get to orbit this year.
Yeah, it's not they just didn't make it to orbit in 2022. They didn't even launch in 2022. And when they did launch in 2023, the rocket blew up after a few minutes. And hell, at the end of 2024, after some 6 flights, they've still not made orbit. Yeah, not entirely convinced that it's the regulations that are slowing you down here. But of course, you go to mainstream, respectable news sources like Reuters, and they will happily tell you that Musk says he's going to be landing Starship on Mars in the next 2 years. Kind of glossing over the fact that Musk's been saying he's going to land on Mars in a couple of years, every year since 2016. Yeah, someone had to do the most rudimentary journalism to show you what you probably already suspected, that damn, is this guy a bullshit artist. Many thanks to those who support this channel through Patreon, and if you want to show the Cooked Banana some love. I hear that the like and subscribe buttons make him happy. And as ever, thanks for watching.